The Wyoming sun hung like a merciless eye in the cloudless sky, burning the prairie grass to brittle yellow stalks that crackled beneath Lena Moore's worn boots. Each step sent small clouds of dust swirling around her ankles, coating the hem of her faded calico dress with another layer of grime. Behind her, connected by a fraying rope, trudged their last possession of any worth, a gaunt cow whose ribs showed through its dusty hide like the bars of a prison. "Mama, I'm thirsty," little Elsie whispered, her voice barely audible above the whisper of the hot wind. The 5-year-old's face was pinched with exhaustion, her small hand clutching her mother's with desperate trust. "I know, sweetheart, just a little further." Lena's lips were cracked and bleeding, but she forced them into what she hoped was a reassuring smile. The canteen had been empty since yesterday afternoon, and the last creek they'd passed had been nothing but a muddy memory in the drought-stricken earth. 3 weeks had passed since the mine collapse in Montana. 3 weeks since her world had crumbled along with those timber supports deep in the earth. James had kissed her goodbye that morning, same as every morning for the past 2 years, his lunch pail swinging from his hand, whistling that Irish tune he loved. By noon, he was gone, crushed beneath tons of rock, along with 7 other men chasing dreams of gold that would never materialize. The mining company had been quick to evict her from the company housing. "Policy, ma'am," the foreman had said, not meeting her eyes. "Accommodations for workers only. No compensation, no sympathy, just a widow's pittance that barely covered the cost of James's pine box burial." The other miners' wives had looked at her with a mixture of pity and fear, as if widowhood might be contagious. Some pressed coins into her palm, but most turned away. She was a reminder of what could happen to any of them. In Copper Creek, the last town they'd passed through, she'd spent her final dollar on a heel of bread and a strip of jerked beef. The boarding house proprietor, a woman with steel-gray hair and harder eyes, had taken one look at Lena's black morning dress and shook her head. "No charity cases," she'd said, "and no mining widows. Bad for business." Lena had begged, had offered to work, cooking, cleaning, anything. But the woman remained unmoved. "You types always say that, then disappear in the night with the silver." It didn't matter that Lena had never stolen anything in her life. She was marked now, branded by her husband's profession and her own desperation. So they'd walked, following rumors of ranches in Wyoming that might need help with the harvest. Day after day. Through dust storms that scoured their skin raw, past abandoned homesteads with broken windows staring like dead eyes. Through towns where people crossed the street to avoid the ragged woman with the hollow cheeks and the silent child. The cow, Buttercup. Elsie had named her back when they'd had a small garden plot and dreams of prosperity. Stumbled, nearly pulling Lena off balance. The animal's head hung low, her gait unsteady. How much further could any of them go? Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Lena looked up with desperate hope. Rain would mean water. Blessed water. But as she watched, her heart sank. The clouds building on the horizon were the wrong color, not the blue-black of a rainstorm, but the sickly green-gray that meant hail. "Quick, Elsie!" She scooped up her daughter, ignoring the protest from her aching back, and ran toward a cluster of rocks she'd spotted earlier. It wasn't much, but there was an overhang that might provide some shelter. They barely made it before the storm hit. Hail the size of marbles, then walnuts, came hammering down with vicious force. Lena pressed Elsie against the rock face, shielding the child with her own body as ice pelted her back and shoulders. Buttercup bellowed in fear and pain, but Lena couldn't help her, could only hold the rope and pray the cow wouldn't bolt and drag them all into the open. The storm passed as quickly as it had come, leaving them soaked and shivering despite the heat. Elsie was crying silently, the way she'd learned to cry these past weeks, without sound, without fuss, as if she understood that their survival depended on being invisible. "Shh, baby, it's over now." Lena examined her daughter for injuries, finding only minor bruises. Her own back throbbed where the largest hailstones had struck, but she ignored it. Buttercup stood trembling, one horn cracked, a gash on her flank bleeding sluggishly. They couldn't stay here. Night would bring cold, and in their wet clothes. That could mean death. Lena forced herself to stand, to take stock. Below them, perhaps 2 miles distant, she could see something that made her heart leap, a line of green cottonwoods, the kind that only grew near water, and beyond that, tucked into a fold of the red rock canyon walls, the geometric lines of human habitation, buildings, a ranch. "Come on, Buttercup," she murmured, tugging gently on the rope. "One more walk. We can make one more walk." The descent was treacherous, loose rocks sliding beneath their feet. But desperation lent Lena strength she didn't know she still possessed. As they drew closer, she could make out details: a sturdy log house with a stone chimney, a barn that had seen better days but still stood straight, corrals that spoke of order and care. This was no abandoned homestead, but a working ranch. A wooden sign hung from the gatepost. The letters burned deep into the wood: Callahan Ranch. Below it, in smaller letters, "No trespassing." Lena hesitated. She'd heard the name in Copper Creek. Rhett Callahan. They'd called him the stone-cold rancher. A man who'd lost his family to scarlet fever and his heart along with them. A man who hired no help, suffered no visitors, and had been known to run off claim jumpers and rustlers at gunpoint. But what choice did she have? Elsie's lips were blue despite the heat, her small body shaking with exhaustion. Buttercup swayed on her feet, eyes glazed with suffering, and Lena herself. She caught a glimpse of her reflection in a puddle of melted hail and barely recognized the gaunt, wild-eyed woman staring back. With trembling fingers, she unlatched the gate. Each step down the dirt path to the house felt like a mile. The windows were dark, curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. No dogs barked, no voices called out. For a moment, Lena wondered if the place was abandoned after all, if Callahan had given up and moved on like so many others. Then she saw him. He stood in the doorway of the barn, watching their approach with an unreadable expression. Even from a distance, Lena could tell he was a big man, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of solid presence that came from years of hard physical labor. He held a pitchfork loosely in one hand, and Lena's steps faltered. Would he run them off before she could even speak? But she'd come too far to turn back now. Squaring her shoulders, ignoring the way her wet dress clung uncomfortably to her bruised back, Lena Moore walked toward what might be salvation or another slammed door. Behind her, Buttercup's hooves dragged in the dust, and Elsie's hand tightened in hers. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried, lonely and wild, the sound of the untamed West that had already taken so much from her. But Lena kept walking, because that's what you did when you had a child depending on you. You kept walking until you couldn't walk anymore. And then you knocked on a stranger's door and prayed for mercy in a land that had precious little to spare. Rhett Callahan didn't move as they approached. He stood like a statue carved from the red rock of the canyon walls, weathered and immovable. Up close, Lena could see the premature silver threading through his dark hair, the deep lines etched around eyes the color of winter sky. Those eyes held no warmth, no welcome, just a weary watchfulness that seemed to look right through her. "Mr. Callahan?" Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. She cleared her throat. Tried again. "Mr. Callahan, I'm sorry to trouble you. My name is Lena Moore, and this is my daughter Elsie. We've been walking for days, and I was wondering—" "I don't hire help." His voice was low, rough as sandpaper, as if he didn't use it often. "And I don't take in strays." The words hit her like physical blows, but Lena had absorbed too many hits to buckle now. "I'm not asking for charity. Sir, I have this cow. She's a good milker when she's fed proper. I'd trade her for just a few nights' shelter. We could sleep in your barn. Wouldn't be any trouble at all. After that, we'll move on." Callahan's gaze shifted to Buttercup, taking in the animal's pitiful state. Something flickered in his expression, not quite sympathy, but perhaps a rancher's instinctive distress at seeing livestock suffer. "That cow's half dead," he said bluntly. "Wouldn't last another week. She just needs water and rest," Lena insisted, though she knew he was probably right. "Please, Mr. Callahan, my little girl." She looked down at Elsie, who stood silent and still as a ghost child, her blue eyes enormous in her pinched face. Callahan followed her gaze, and for the first time, something shifted in his expression. He set the pitchfork against the barn wall and stepped into the fading light. He was even taller than she'd thought, built like an oak tree, solid and enduring. His clothes were clean but worn, his boots mended with careful stitches. A man who took care of things, who believed in maintenance and order. "Where's your husband?" The question she'd been dreading. "Dead. Mine accident in Montana. 3 weeks past." He absorbed this information without comment, his face giving nothing away. The silence stretched between them, broken only by Buttercup's labored breathing and the distant call of a meadowlark. Finally, Callahan turned and walked toward the house. For a moment, Lena thought he was dismissing them, and despair rose in her throat like bile. But then he paused at the door, not looking back. "There's a tack room in the barn. Has a stove. You can bed down there." He disappeared inside before she could respond. Lena stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. He hadn't taken the cow, hadn't demanded anything in trade, just offered shelter. "Is he letting us stay, Mama?" Elsie whispered. "Yes, baby, I think he is." The barn was neat as a pin. Tools hung in their proper places. Hay stacked with military precision. The tack room was small but clean, with a pot-bellied stove, a narrow cot, and shelves lined with horse liniment and leather oil. It smelled of saddle soap and old wood, comforting scents that reminded Lena of her father's farm back in Missouri, before the drought drove them west. She was settling Elsie on the cot, trying to make her comfortable with their single threadbare blanket, when Callahan appeared in the doorway. He carried a basket covered with a checkered cloth, which he set on the floor without ceremony. "Spring's out back of the barn," he said. "For water. There's hay in the loft for your cow." He turned to leave, then paused. "Don't go in the house, Mr. Callahan," Lena started, but he was already gone, his long strides carrying him back across the yard. Under the cloth, she found treasures, fresh bread, still warm from the oven, a jar of milk, boiled eggs, dried beef, even a small pot of butter and another of strawberry preserves. Elsie's eyes went wide at the sight of such bounty. "Can we really eat it all, Mama?" "Yes, sweetheart, every bite." They ate slowly, savoring each mouthful. Real food, not the scraps and charity handouts they'd survived on for weeks. Lena tried not to cry as she watched Elsie lick strawberry preserves from her fingers with something approaching her old childhood delight. Later, after she'd drawn water for Buttercup and rubbed the cow down with old sacking. After she'd banked the fire in the little stove and tucked Elsie into the cot. Lena stood in the doorway of the tack room and looked across at the house. Light glowed in one window. The kitchen, she guessed. Through the glass, she could just make out Callahan's silhouette moving about. What kind of man was he, this hermit rancher who'd lost everything? The people in town had painted him as hard and unforgiving. Yet he'd taken them in without demanding payment, had fed them from his own table. She noticed a small building set apart from the house, barely visible in the gathering darkness. Something about it drew her attention, perhaps the way it stood so precisely placed, or the small fence that surrounded it. A family cemetery, she realized with a chill, where his wife and child lay buried. That night, she woke to the sound of footsteps outside. Tensing, she peered through a crack in the door. Callahan stood in the yard, looking up at the stars. Even from a distance, she could see the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself apart from the world. He stood there for a long time, so still he might have been carved from stone, before finally returning to the house. In the morning, another basket appeared outside their door, along with food. There was a piece of brown paper with words written in a careful hand. "List what you need for the child." Lena stared at the note, overwhelmed. When was the last time anyone had asked what they needed? She found a stub of pencil in her sewing kit and wrote, "Elsie's shoes are worn through, but we can make do." She left the note where she'd found it. An hour later, Callahan appeared with an armload of supplies, a pair of child's boots that looked barely worn, some sturdy fabric, needles and thread, soap and a comb. These were... He stopped, cleared his throat. They're no use to anyone in storage. Lena understood. These had belonged to his child. The boots were too big for Elsie, but that was good. She'd grow into them. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll take good care of them." He nodded once and strode away. The days fell into a pattern. Callahan left food outside their door morning and evening, during the day, while he worked with his horses or mended fences. Lena found small ways to be useful. She mucked out stalls, gathered eggs from the chicken coop, weeded the neglected kitchen garden. He never asked her to do these things, but he didn't tell her to stop either. Sometimes she caught him watching them from a distance. Once, she saw him pause outside the barn when Elsie was singing to Buttercup, a little nonsense song about butterflies and sunshine. His face had gone strange then, soft and broken all at once, before he turned and walked quickly away. She began leaving small offerings in return for his kindness. Wild flowers in a jar on his porch, his work shirts mended and folded, the horse trough scrubbed clean. He never acknowledged these gestures, but the gifts didn't disappear either. One evening, she found him in the barn, doctoring a cut on a horse's leg. Without thinking, she stepped forward to help, holding the animal's head while he worked. Their hands brushed as she handed him a bandage, and they both froze. It was the first time they'd touched, and the contact sent an unexpected jolt through her. "Sorry," she mumbled, stepping back. "No need." His voice was gruff, but not unkind. "You've got away with horses?" "My father raised them, back in Missouri." "What brought you west?" The question surprised her. It was the first personal thing he'd asked beyond that initial inquiry about her husband. "Same as everyone, I suppose. Looking for something better. James, my husband, he was sure there was gold just waiting for him to find it." "Gold." Callahan's mouth twisted. "Men die for gold. Families starve for it. Never seen it do anyone much good." "What matters to you then?" "If not gold." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Finally," he said. "Used to be family. Now," he shrugged. "Just keeping things running, I guess, day after day." There was something so lonely in those words that Lena's heart ached. She wanted to tell him she understood, that she too was just trying to survive each day. But the moment passed, and he returned to tending the horse. That night, unable to sleep, she crept out to where she could see the house. A book lay open on his kitchen table. No, not a book, a ledger of some kind. She watched him write in it, his hand moving slowly across the page. When he was done, he stared at what he'd written for a long time before closing the cover and putting out the light. Curiosity consumed her. What did a man like Rhett Callahan write in his ledger? Ranch business, probably, cattle prices and feed costs, but something about the way he'd held that pen, the care he'd taken with each word, suggested otherwise. The next day, while he was out checking the fence line, she found herself drawn to the kitchen window, wrong to spy. She knew, but she had to understand this man who'd saved them. The ledger lay closed on the table. From her angle, she could just make out words etched into the leather cover. Daily record. Then she saw it. A line written on a piece of paper tucked beneath the ledger. Perhaps notes for a future entry. Family is worth more than gold. The words hit her like a physical blow. This man who lived alone, who'd lost everything, still believed that, still wrote it down like a promise or a prayer. She heard his footsteps on the porch and quickly retreated to the barn, her mind spinning. That night, as she watched him through the window again, she saw him open the ledger and write. His face was composed, but she'd learned to read the subtle signs of his emotion, the tightness around his mouth, the way he pressed too hard with the pen. Rhett Callahan was a man hollowed out by loss, going through the motions of living without really being alive, and yet he'd taken them in, shared what he had, asked nothing in return. Perhaps because he remembered what it was like to have something precious to protect. Perhaps because, in his loneliness, even the presence of strangers in his barn was better than the echoing emptiness of pure solitude. Whatever his reasons, Lena knew they couldn't impose on him forever. But for now, for these few grace-given days, she and Elsie had shelter and food and safety. It was more than she'd dared hope for when she'd knocked on his door. Tomorrow she would think about moving on. Tonight, she would be grateful for small mercies and the kindness of a wounded man who still believed that family mattered more than gold. The first snow came early that year, drifting down like ash from a cold fire. Lena woke to find the world transformed. The harsh edges of the canyon softened beneath a white blanket. Through the frost-etched window of the tack room, she watched Callahan emerge from the house, his breath clouding in the frigid air as he headed for the barn. 3 weeks had passed since their arrival, and still he hadn't asked them to leave. The truth was written in the early snow. Travel would soon become impossible. The passes would close. The roads would vanish beneath drifts. Like it or not, they were stuck here until spring. "Mr. Callahan," she called, stepping out into the cold. "About the winter. Get your things." His voice was flat, unreadable. "Can't have you freezing in that tack room." Her heart sank. So this was it. He was finally sending them away. But instead of heading for the gate, he walked toward a small cabin she'd noticed but never approached, set back behind the main house. He produced a key from his pocket and unlocked the door. "Foreman's quarters," he said. "Haven't been used in years, but the roof's sound. Stove works." The cabin was dusty but intact. One room with a proper bed, a table, 2 chairs, and a cooking stove. Real windows with glass panes. A wooden floor instead of packed earth. After weeks of makeshift shelters, it seemed like a palace. "I can't," Lena began, overwhelmed. "We can't take—" "You'll earn it," he cut her off. "Storm's coming. I'll need help with the stock, keeping paths clear, usual winter work. You up for that?" "Yes." The word came out fierce, desperate. "Yes, anything." He nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "Might as well take your meals in the main house. Waste of wood heating 2 places. And just like that, their lives shifted again. That first evening in Callahan's kitchen was awkward, the silence broken only by the clink of spoons against bowls. The room was clean, but cheerless. No curtains on the windows, no cloth on the table, nothing that spoke of a woman's touch. Elsie sat rigid with shyness, stealing glances at their host when she thought he wasn't looking. But as the days passed, a fragile routine emerged. Lena cooked breakfast while Callahan did the morning chores. They ate together, quietly discussing the day's work. Then he would disappear to tend the horses while she cleaned up and began her own tasks. Evenings found them together again, sharing supper and sometimes sitting by the fire afterward. Elsie playing with a set of carved wooden animals Callahan had wordlessly produced from somewhere. The first time Lena saw him smile, really smile, was when Elsie fell asleep against his shoulder one evening. The child had been fighting sleep, determined to finish arranging her wooden horses in neat rows, when exhaustion finally won. Her small head drooped sideways, finding the solid comfort of Callahan's arm. He went very still, looking down at the sleeping child with an expression of such raw longing that Lena had to look away. When she glanced back, that rare smile had transformed his face, erasing years of grief in an instant. "She's a good girl," he said softly. "She misses her father," Lena replied, then wished she hadn't. The smile faded, and carefully, gently, he shifted Elsie into Lena's arms. Winter tightened its grip. The predicted storm arrived with a vengeance. 3 days of howling wind and snow that piled in drifts higher than a man's head. They worked together to keep the animals fed and watered, breaking ice on the troughs, hauling hay from the loft. During the worst of it, when the wind threatened to knock her off her feet, Callahan simply picked her up and carried her back to the house as if she weighed nothing. "I can walk," she protested through chattering teeth. "Not in this wind. You can't." His arms were iron strong around her, his body a solid wall against the storm. For just a moment, she let herself lean into that strength, feeling safer than she had in months. Inside, he set her on her feet and stepped back quickly, as if burned. "Get warm," he muttered, and disappeared back into the blizzard. On the third night of the storm, one of the mares went into distress. Lena found Callahan in the barn, sweat beading his forehead despite the cold as he tried to help the struggling animal. "Foal's turned wrong," he said without looking up. "Can't get it right. Let me try." She'd helped her father with difficult births before. "My hands are smaller." Together they worked through the night, taking turns, encouraging the mare through her pain. Dawn was breaking when the foal finally slipped free, wet and perfect and alive. The mare nickered softly, nosing her baby, and Callahan let out a breath Lena hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thank you," he said, and his hand briefly covered hers where it rested on the stall door. The touch was fleeting but warm, leaving an imprint that seemed to pulse with its own heat. They were both exhausted, covered in hay and sweat, but there was a satisfaction in their shared accomplishment. As they stood watching the mare and foal bond, Lena became acutely aware of Callahan beside her, the way he absently rubbed his jaw, the quiet pride in his eyes, the solid presence of him. "You should rest," she said. "I'll watch them for a while. We both should rest." But neither of them moved. The barn was warming with the risen sun, dust motes dancing in the golden light that slanted through the windows. It was peaceful, perfect, and somehow precious. "Sarah loved this," he said suddenly. "The foaling. Said it was like watching miracles happen." It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife by name. Lena held very still, afraid that any movement might stop this rare moment of openness. "She would have liked you," he continued, still watching the foal struggle to its feet. "She had a way with animals too, with people, made everything brighter." "I'm sorry," Lena said softly, "for your loss." He was quiet for so long she thought the conversation was over. Then, "Tommy would be 7 now. Same age as your Elsie." "Near enough." He had Sarah's smile. The pain in his voice was so raw it made her chest tight. Without thinking, she reached out, laying her hand over his where it gripped the stall door. He didn't pull away. "Gets easier," he said roughly. "People told me that. They lied. Doesn't get easier. Just gets different. Learn to carry it is all." "Yes," Lena whispered, thinking of James. Not the same kind of love, perhaps. Theirs had been a practical marriage, born of necessity more than passion. But loss was loss, and the weight of carrying on alone was something she understood. Callahan turned his hand palm up, briefly squeezing hers before stepping away. "Breakfast," he said gruffly. "Growing girls need feeding." But something had shifted between them in that barn. Some invisible wall had cracked. As the winter days passed, she caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read. He began talking more at meals, teaching Elsie about the horses, even telling the occasional story about his childhood in Texas. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Elsie asked if she could call him Uncle Rhett. "If you like," he said, but Lena saw his hand still on his coffee cup, saw the muscle jump in his jaw. Later, after Elsie was asleep, Lena found him standing on the porch despite the cold, looking out at the snow-covered land. "Thank you," she said, joining him, "for being kind to her. She's easy to be kind to." He glanced at her sideways. "Both of you are." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Lena pulled her shawl tighter, unsure how to respond. The moon was full, turning the snow-covered landscape into something from a fairy tale, beautiful but cold, distant but achingly bright. "I should check the horses," Callahan said abruptly, but he didn't move. "They're fine," Lena said. "You checked them an hour ago." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "So I did." They stood together in comfortable silence, two damaged souls finding unexpected solace in shared presence. Somewhere in the house, a log shifted in the fire. In the barn, horses nickered softly to each other. and in the space between them, something new and fragile began to take root, as inevitable and patient as spring beneath the snow. The cold finally drove them inside, but Lena felt the warmth of possibility kindling in her chest. Whatever this was growing between them, it was as unexpected as wildflowers in the desert, and just as precious. She thought of the words she'd seen in his ledger. Family is worth more than gold. Perhaps, just perhaps. They were both learning that family could be found in the most unexpected places, built not just from blood, but from shared struggles, quiet kindnesses, and the courage to trust again despite the risk of loss. Spring came slowly to the canyon, melting snow revealing the first brave shoots of grass. Lena had made the trip to town for supplies, leaving Elsie safe with Callahan and the new foal she'd grown to adore. The 20-mile journey to Willow Creek required borrowing one of the ranch horses, and Callahan had insisted she take his rifle, though she'd assured him she'd be fine. She should have known better. The trouble started at Morrison's general store. Mrs. Morrison, a pinch-faced woman who ruled the town's social hierarchy, looked Lena up and down with undisguised contempt. Well, the widow Moore. Heard you've been keeping house for Rhett Callahan all winter. The emphasis on keeping house made it clear what she really meant. Lena kept her voice steady as she placed her order. Mr. Callahan was kind enough to offer me work in exchange for shelter. I'm sure he was. Mrs. Morrison's smile was sharp as broken glass. Very kind indeed, though one wonders what sort of work requires a widow to live on his property, unchaperoned. The other women in the store tittered behind their hands. Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks, but forced herself to remain calm. I help with the horses and household duties. It's all quite proper. Proper? A male voice slurred from the doorway. Jake Henshaw swaggered in, reeking of whiskey despite the early hour. He'd propositioned Lena on her last trip to town, and she'd firmly refused him. Clearly, he hadn't forgotten. Ain't nothing proper about a woman like you living with a man ain't your husband. I'll thank you to mind your own business, Mr. Henshaw. Lena gathered her purchases quickly, eager to leave, but Henshaw blocked her path. Maybe Callahan don't know what kind of woman he's got under his roof. Mining camp followers, always looking for the next man to keep them. That's a lie. Lena's voice shook with anger. My husband was a good man, who left you with nothing but a worn-out cow and a brat to feed. Henshaw leered closer. Lucky for you, Callahan's too broken up over his dead wife to see what you really are. But when he tosses you out, you remember Jake Henshaw's willing to take his leavings. The slap echoed through the store. Henshaw's face went dark with rage, and he grabbed Lena's wrist hard enough to bruise. You'll regret that, woman. Let her go. The new voice was quiet, but carried the weight of authority. Mrs. Margaret Palmer, the minister's wife, stood in the doorway. Jake Henshaw, you're drunk and disorderly. Release Mrs. Moore immediately. Henshaw spat on the floor, but released Lena's wrist. This ain't over, he muttered before stumbling out. Mrs. Palmer helped Lena gather her scattered purchases. Pay them no mind. Dear, small towns breed small minds. But the damage was done. As Lena rode home, her wrist throbbing, she knew the gossip would spread like wildfire. By evening, everyone would be talking about the mining widow who'd slapped Jake Henshaw while defending her arrangement with a hermit rancher. She was still shaking when she reached the ranch. Callahan was in the corral working with a young stallion. He took one look at her face and immediately vaulted the fence. What happened? Nothing. I'm fine. But her voice broke on the words. His gaze dropped to her wrist, already purpling with bruises in the shape of fingers. His whole body went rigid. Who? It doesn't matter. Who? The word came out as a growl. Jake Henshaw. But please, just leave it be. She couldn't meet his eyes. They're saying things about us, about me living here. I've brought scandal to your door, and I'm so sorry. Stop. He gently lifted her chin, forcing her to look at him. His blue eyes blazed with a fury she'd never seen before. What exactly did Henshaw say? Reluctantly, she told him. With each word, Callahan's jaw tightened further. When she finished, he turned toward the barn. Where are you going? To saddle my horse. No, she caught his arm. Please, it will only make things worse. People already think. She couldn't finish. I don't give a damn what people think. But I do, the words burst out of her. Don't you see? They're calling me, saying I'm... Tears spilled down her cheeks. Maybe I should leave, find somewhere else. Don't! His hand covered hers where it gripped his arm. Don't even think it. But your reputation. My reputation. He laughed bitterly. I'm the man who went half mad with grief, who drove everyone away, who talks to graves more than living people. You think I care what those hypocrites in town say? This is different. They're saying that I'm using you, that I'm the kind of woman who... Stop. He framed her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs brushing away her tears. You're the woman who saved my mare and foal, who brought laughter back to this house, who makes Elsie smile and tends my home like it matters. That's who you are. They stood frozen, his hands cupping her face, her tears still falling. Something electric passed between them, a pull as inevitable as gravity. She saw the moment he realized how close they were, saw him start to pull back, but she didn't let him. Rising on her toes, she pressed her lips to his. For a heartbeat, he stood rigid with shock. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against him as he kissed her back with 3 years of loneliness and longing. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate, hungry, a claiming and a surrender all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lena felt as if the world had tilted on its axis. I'm sorry, she whispered, though she wasn't sorry at all. Don't, his voice was rough. Don't apologize, just give me a minute. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair, visibly trying to collect himself. When he finally looked at her again, his expression was carefully controlled. This changes things, he said. Her heart sank. I understand. I'll start packing. What? No. He caught her shoulders. That's not what I meant. I meant, if we're giving the town something to talk about anyway, might as well do this proper. Proper? She blinked at him, confused. A smile tugged at his lips, that rare, transformative smile. Lena Moore, will you have dinner with me tonight? As my guest, not my employee. Let me court you the way a decent woman deserves. But people will. Let them talk. I'm done living for other people's opinions. His hands gentled on her shoulders. Unless you don't want... I want, she said quickly, then blushed at her eagerness. I mean, yes, I'd like that. That evening, after Elsie was asleep, Lena put on her best dress, the blue one she'd been saving, and joined Callahan in the dining room. He'd transformed the usually plain space with candles and wildflowers, had even unearthed a tablecloth from somewhere. It's beautiful, she said softly. He pulled out her chair, formal as any gentleman. You're beautiful. They ate the simple meal in companionable silence at first, but gradually began talking, not about work or weather, but real things. He told her about meeting Sarah at a church social, how she laughed at his clumsy attempts to dance. She told him about her dreams of having a little farm someday, raising horses like her father had. Why horses? He asked. They're honest. She said, they don't pretend or judge. If they trust you, it's real. If they don't, they let you know. Like people should be. Yes, he reached across the table, taking her hand. I haven't been honest. Not with you, not with myself. Her heart stuttered. What do you mean? I told myself I was being charitable, taking you in, told myself it was just Christian kindness. His thumb traced circles on her palm. But that was a lie. Truth is, I was selfish. This house had been empty so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to have life in it, to have someone to talk to over supper, to hear a child's laughter. He looked up at her, to see a woman's touch making things better. Rhett, I'm not good at pretty words. He continued, But I need you to know. What people are saying isn't all wrong. Not the ugly parts, but about us, about what's between us. It's real, isn't it? Yes, she whispered. He stood, still holding her hand, and drew her to her feet. I won't kiss you again tonight, he said. Won't give those gossips more fuel. But I need you to know, you're not some convenience. You're not a replacement or a bandage for old wounds. You're Lena. And he stopped, struggling for words. I know, she said softly. I know. He walked her to her cabin door like a proper gentleman caller. But before she went inside, she turned back. What about tomorrow? When people find out you're courting the scandalous widow? His smile was fierce. Then they'll learn what Jake Henshaw's about to learn. Nobody insults my family. Your family? You and Elsie, if you'll have me. The vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. I know I'm not much of a bargain. Broken down rancher with too many ghosts. But I promise I'll do right by you both. Lena thought of all the closed doors. All the sneers and whispers. All the times she'd been made to feel less than human because she was poor, widowed, desperate. Then she thought of this man who'd opened his home, who'd fed them and sheltered them and asked nothing in return, who looked at her like she was precious. We'll face them together, she said. Together, he agreed. As she lay in her narrow bed that night, Lena touched her lips, still feeling the press of his kiss. Outside her window, she could see the light burning in his room. Was he lying awake too, thinking of her? Tomorrow would bring challenges. Henshaw wouldn't let the insult pass. The town would have plenty to say about Rhett Callahan courting his hired help. But tonight, she felt something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten its name. Hope. The fire burned low in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the parlor walls. Outside, spring rain drummed against the windows, creating a curtain of privacy around the house. Elsie had been asleep for hours, worn out from helping with the new foal, and the ranch hands who occasionally stopped by for supplies had long since departed. Lena sat mending one of Rhett's shirts, trying to focus on the needle and thread rather than the man himself. He occupied the chair across from her, supposedly reading a week-old newspaper, but she could feel his eyes on her. They'd been dancing around each other for days since that kiss, since his declaration of courtship. Proper courtship, he'd said, but the propriety was killing them both. You'll wear a hole in that paper if you stare at it much harder, she said without looking up. Wasn't reading anyway? His voice was rough, honest. Can't concentrate with you sitting there looking like... Like what? She finally met his gaze, and the heat there made her breath catch. Like home. He finished softly. Like everything I thought I'd never have again. The shirt slipped from her nerveless fingers. Rhett. He was across the room before she could finish, pulling her to her feet. Tell me to leave, he said, his hands framing her face. Tell me to go back to my side of the house and stop thinking about you. About this. I can't, she whispered. I won't. His mouth claimed hers with a hunger that matched her own. This wasn't the desperate first kiss born of emotion and surprise. This was deliberate, mutual, a choice made with full knowledge of what it meant. His hands tangled in her hair, pins scattering across the floor as auburn waves tumbled free. God, Lena, he breathed against her lips. Do you know what you do to me? How many nights I've lain awake, knowing you're just across the yard? She pulled him closer, answering with her body what she couldn't put into words. The loneliness, the need, the unexpected gift of finding someone who understood loss but still chose hope. It all poured out in the way she kissed him back. He lifted her easily, carrying her to the sofa, laying her down with infinite care. We should stop, he said, even as his lips found the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. Should we? Her hands mapped the broad expanse of his back, feeling muscles bunch and flex beneath his shirt. We're both grown. Both know what it is to be alone. He pulled back to look at her, his blue eyes dark with want but also something deeper. You deserve better than stolen moments. You deserve a wedding, A proper bed, promises made before God and witnesses. She touched his face, tracing the lines that grief and weather had carved there. I've had all that. Had the wedding and the promises and the proper bed, and then I had nothing but ash and debt and doors slammed in my face. Her voice broke. What I never had was someone who looked at me the way you're looking at me now. Like I matter. Like I'm not just useful or convenient, but wanted. Wanted? He laughed, low and unsteady. Lena, I want you so much it's like burning from the inside. But more than that, I need you. Need your strength and your smile and the way you hum when you're happy. Need to see you at my table and know you'll be there tomorrow and the day after. Then have me, she whispered. All of me. Not because it's proper or because we should wait, but because life is short and cruel, and sometimes it gives us gifts we're too scared to unwrap. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands relearning what it meant to touch with tenderness. She arched beneath him, every nerve ending alive with sensation. The rain grew heavier, thunder rolling across the prairie, and it felt like the world itself was bearing witness to this moment. Your room, she managed between kisses. Elsie might wake. He carried her through the dark house to his bedroom, a place she'd never entered. It was sparse, almost monastic, but clean and orderly. He set her on her feet beside the bed, suddenly hesitant. I haven't... He struggled for words. Not since Sarah. I know, she said gently. It's all right. We'll go slow. But slow was impossible once they started. 3 years of grief for him, months of fear and desperation for her. It all melted away in the heat between them. Clothes were shed with trembling hands, revealing bodies marked by hard work and harder lives. She traced the scars on his chest, badges of survival. He kissed the bruises that hadn't quite faded from her wrist, as if he could erase the hurt with tenderness. When they came together at last, it was with a rightness that transcended mere physical need. This was coming home, finding harbor, choosing to live again despite all the reasons not to. She gasped his name, and he buried his face in her hair, whispering endearments that might have been prayers. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the rain and their gradually slowing heartbeats. Lena traced lazy patterns on his chest, marveling at the simple pleasure of skin against skin. No regrets? He asked. None. You? Only that I waited so long. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Stay with me tonight. Let me wake up with you here. The talk in town will be the same whether you stay or go. Might as well be warm while they gossip. She laughed, the sound bubbling up from some deep well of happiness she'd thought had run dry. Practical man, getting more practical by the day. His arms tightened around her. Practical enough to know when I found something worth fighting for. They dozed, woke to love again. Slower this time, learning each other's rhythms and responses. He whispered her name like a benediction, and she answered with soft cries that seemed to heal something broken in both of them. Near dawn, she stirred. I should go back, before Elsie wakes. Marry me first. She went still. What? I mean it. He sat up, pulling her with him. I've got the papers in my desk. Been carrying them for weeks, waiting for the courage to ask proper. But to hell with proper. Marry me, Lena. Today. Now. Before the sun comes up and the world intrudes. Rhett, you can't mean... I've never meant anything more. He cupped her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. I know it's fast. No people will say we're fools. But I also know what it's like to lose everything in a heartbeat. Don't want to waste another day pretending this isn't what it is. And what is it? Love, he said simply. May not be the first for either of us, may not be perfect or easy, but it's real and it's ours, and I want to claim it before God and anybody else who cares to witness. Tears slipped down her cheeks. The minister won't marry us at dawn, and there's Elsie to think of. Justice of the Peace lives 2 hours' ride north, Josiah Mills. Good man. Married Sarah and me. He kissed her tears away. We'll take Elsie. Make it an adventure. What do you say? She thought of all the reasons to say no, the unseemly haste, the gossip, the fact that they barely knew each other. Really. Then she thought of Jake Henshaw's cruel words, of Mrs. Morrison's sneering face, of all the people who'd made her feel small and worthless. And she thought of this man who'd opened his home and heart, who looked at her like she hung the moon, who offered not just passion but partnership. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her fiercely, joyfully, and she tasted hope on his lips when they finally broke apart. The first light of dawn was painting the mountains gold. "Get dressed," he said, grinning like a boy. "We've got a wedding to get to." She laughed, scrambling for her scattered clothes. "Elsie will think we've lost our minds. Maybe we have." He caught her hand, pulling her back for one more kiss. Best kind of madness, though. As she slipped back to her cabin to wake her daughter and pack their few belongings, Lena felt as if she were floating. In her diary that morning, she wrote, "Today I choose joy. Not because the world has become kinder or the path easier, but because I've learned that happiness seized is worth more than propriety maintained. I am nobody's ideal widow, nobody's perfect woman, but I am loved, and that is worth everything." The sun rose full and bright, burning away the last of the storm clouds, and somewhere between its rising and setting, Lena Moore would become Lena Callahan, trading her old sorrows for new possibilities. It wasn't the wedding she'd dreamed of as a girl, no white dress or church bells or approving families, but it was real and true, and theirs, and that was more than enough. The stranger arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, riding a fine bay mare that spoke of money and breeding. Lena was in the garden with Elsie, teaching her to distinguish weeds from vegetables. When the rider appeared at the gate, something about his bearing, arrogant, proprietary, made her uneasy. "Mrs. Callahan." His voice was cultured, Eastern educated. "I'm Harrison Caldwell, Rhett's cousin from Denver." She'd never heard Rhett mention any cousin, but she smiled politely. "He's in the north pasture. I can send someone." "No need. I'll wait." He dismounted with practiced ease, his eyes scanning the property with an appraiser's calculation. "I must say, I was surprised to hear Rhett had remarried so soon after dear Sarah's passing." 3 months. They'd been married 3 months, and in that time, Lena had transformed the house into a home again. Curtains graced the windows, flowers bloomed in window boxes, and laughter regularly rang through rooms that had known too much silence. But to this stranger, she saw she was nothing but an interloper. 3 years isn't so very soon," she said quietly. "Is that what he told you?" Caldwell's smile was sharp. "How convenient." Before she could respond, Rhett appeared, drawn perhaps by some instinct that trouble had arrived. His face went carefully blank when he saw his visitor. "Harrison, what brings you here? Family business? Cousin? Might we speak privately?" Rhett's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Lena, would you take Elsie inside?" She wanted to protest, to stand beside her husband, but the look in his eyes asked for trust. So she gathered Elsie and retreated to the house, though worry gnawed at her bones. Through the kitchen window, she watched the men talk. Caldwell gestured broadly, producing papers from his saddlebags. Rhett's posture grew more rigid with each passing moment. When Caldwell pointed at the house, at her, Rhett's hands clenched into fists. An hour later, Rhett found her in their bedroom, folding laundry with hands that wouldn't quite steady. "What did he want?" she asked. "The ranch." His voice was flat, defeated. "Seems my father's will wasn't as clear as I thought. Harrison claims right of inheritance as the eldest male Callahan heir, since I have no sons." The clothes slipped from her numb fingers. "But this is your home. You've worked it for years." "Doesn't matter, not to the law." He sank onto the bed, head in his hands. "I should have known this would happen. Should have seen it coming when we lost Tommy." She knelt before him, taking his hands. "We'll fight this. There must be something." "With what?" Bitter laughter escaped him. You think I have money for lawyers? Everything I had went into keeping this place running. And Harrison, he's got Denver mining money behind him. Probably been planning this for years, just waiting for the right moment. Then we'll find another way. She gripped his hands tighter. I won't let him take our home. Our home. He looked at her with such pain it stole her breath. I brought you here promising safety, promising a future, and now nothing. We're not giving up. She stood, pacing to the window. Below, Caldwell was examining the barn like he already owned it. What exactly does he need to claim inheritance? Proof that I can't produce an heir, that the Callahan line through me is finished. The words hung heavy between them. They'd not spoken of children, both too damaged by loss to voice such hopes. But now, then we prove him wrong, she said quietly. Lena, I mean it. She turned to face him. The law says you need an heir, then we give them one. It's not that simple. These things take time, and even then, there's no guarantee. I know, she returned to him, framing his face with her hands. But we have to try. This ranch, this life we're building, it's worth fighting for. He pulled her close, burying his face against her stomach. I can't lose you too, if something happened, if childbirth. Nothing will happen, she said firmly, though they both knew it was a promise she couldn't make. I'm strong, and you'll be here with me. We'll face it together. That night, they loved with new purpose beneath the old quilts, whispering prayers between kisses, and every night after, while Caldwell lingered in town on business, they reached for each other with desperate hope. The news of Caldwell's claim spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Suddenly, the ranch saw more visitors than it had in years. Neighbors who'd once crossed streets to avoid them now stopped by with casseroles and concerned faces. Some came to gawk, others to offer genuine support. Jake Henshaw was among the first, strutting onto the property like he had rights to it. Heard you might be looking for new arrangements soon, he said, leering at Lena as she collected eggs. My offer still stands. Man like Caldwell won't want used goods cluttering up his property. Get off my land, Rhett's voice came from behind her, deadly quiet. Henshaw turned, still smirking. Your land? Not for much longer. From what I hear, less your woman can pop out a son right quick. Though maybe she's as barren as that milk cow she traded for? The punch laid Henshaw out flat. Rhett stood over him, fists clenched, looking ready to do worse. Rhett, no. Lena caught his arm. He's not worth it. Listen to your woman, Callahan. Henshaw spat blood, struggling to his feet. You'll need her earnings when you're working as a hired hand on what used to be yours. Leave, now. Rhett's control was paper thin. Come near my wife again, and I'll kill you. Henshaw backed away, but his parting words chilled Lena's blood. Caldwell's already drawing up papers. Better start packing. That evening, as she served supper, Lena made a decision. I'm going to town tomorrow. Like hell, Rhett said immediately. Not alone, not with Henshaw making threats. I won't be alone. Mrs. Palmer offered to accompany me. The minister's wife had become an unexpected ally. There's a lawyer there, Mr. Fitzgerald. He might help. We can't afford. Then I'll find a way to make him listen anyway. She met his eyes steadily. I won't stand by and do nothing while that vulture steals our home. The next morning found her in Seamus Fitzgerald's dusty office, Mrs. Palmer a steady presence beside her. The elderly lawyer listened with sharp intelligence as she explained their situation. Interesting, he mused. The will specifies male heir, you say, but not son. I'm not sure, Lena frowned. Does it matter? Potentially. He pulled out a massive legal tome. There's precedent. Here, Thornberry versus Thornberry, 1876. Male heir was interpreted to include sons-in-law, who took the family name. He peered at her over his spectacles. Did your husband formally adopt your daughter? No, but she calls him Papa now, and not enough. However, he tapped the page thoughtfully. If he were to adopt her, and if she were to inherit with the understanding that her future husband take the Callahan name. A girl can inherit? Not directly, but she can be the vessel through which inheritance passes. It's complicated, requires specific language, but, he smiled, I believe we might have found your loophole, Mrs. Callahan. Hope bloomed in her chest. You'll help us? My dear woman, I've been waiting 30 years for a case interesting enough to bring me out of semi-retirement. His eyes gleamed. Besides, I never did like mining money, thinking it could buy everything. Yes, I'll help. Pro bono. On one condition. Anything. Your husband's testimony helped acquit my son of rustling charges 10 years ago. He wouldn't take payment then. Consider this settling an old debt. Lena left the office feeling lighter than she had in days. But as she and Mrs. Palmer walked toward the mercantile, a familiar figure blocked their path. Well. The mining widow playing at being a rancher's wife. Caldwell's smile was all teeth. Consulting lawyers, are we? How enterprising. Though I doubt even Fitzgerald can help you produce a son before my claim is finalized. We'll see about that, Lena said coolly. Indeed we will. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You know, there's an easier solution. Convince Rhett to sell willingly, and I'll make it worth your while. Enough to set you and your daughter up comfortably elsewhere. This is our home. Your home? He laughed. You've been here, 6 months? Sarah lived here for 7 years. Bore a son here, died here. You're just a placeholder. Mrs. Moore. Oh, pardon me, Mrs. Callahan. A convenient body to warm his bed and ease his grief. But you'll never really belong here. The words hit like physical blows, each one finding its mark. Because beneath the cruelty lay her own secret fears, that she was just a substitute, that Rhett's love was born of loneliness rather than genuine feeling. That's enough, Mrs. Palmer stepped forward, every inch the minister's wife. Come, Lena, we needn't listen to such poison. But the damage was done, all the way home. Caldwell's words echoed in her mind. That night, she was quiet at supper, pushing food around her plate. What did he say to you? Rhett asked after Elsie had gone to bed. Nothing important? Lena. He caught her hand. What did he say? So she told him, watching his face darken with each word. When she finished, he stood abruptly, pacing to the window. He's wrong, he said finally. About all of it, but especially about you being a placeholder. He turned to face her. You want to know the truth? The whole truth? She nodded, bracing herself. I loved Sarah. She was sweet and gentle and everything a man could want in a wife, but... He struggled for words. It was an easy love, comfortable, expected. We never fought, never challenged each other, just existed together. He crossed to her, pulling her to her feet. You're nothing easy. You're fire and steel and stubbornness. You make me work for every smile, fight for every inch of ground. You've seen me at my worst and still choose to stand beside me. That's not placeholder love. Lena, that's the real thing, the kind that lasts. Tears spilled down her cheeks as he kissed her, tasting truth on his lips. When they broke apart, she managed a watery smile. Mr. Fitzgerald thinks he found a way. If you adopt Elsie officially, done, tomorrow, if possible. He cupped her face. She's my daughter in every way that matters. Should have done it months ago. And if I can't give you a son, then Elsie inherits. And we'll make sure any man who wants to court her knows he's taking the Callahan name. He smiled. Though I pity the fool who tries to court her with you as her mother and me cleaning my rifle on the porch. She laughed, the sound breaking through her tears. I love you, and I love you. No matter what name you carry or whose memory haunts these halls, you're my wife, my partner, my future. Harrison Caldwell can go to hell. Outside, spring thunder rolled across the prairie, promising rain and renewal. And in the shelter of their home, the home they would fight for with every weapon at their disposal, Lena Callahan finally believed that some battles could be won with love as ammunition and hope as strategy. The war for the ranch had begun. But for tonight, in her husband's arms, she had already won everything that truly mattered. The little wooden church sat weathered but dignified at the edge of town, its whitewash faded to gray, its steeple reaching toward heaven with quiet determination. Inside, wildflowers adorned the simple altar, Indian paintbrush and prairie roses that Elsie had gathered that morning, their bright colors a defiant splash against the austere surroundings. Lena smoothed her dress, the same blue one she'd worn for their hasty first wedding at the Justice of the Peace. But this time felt different. This time, the whole town would witness. This time, they were declaring before God and everyone that what they'd built together was worth protecting. "You look beautiful, Mama," Elsie whispered, adorable in her white dress with its ribbon sash. Mrs. Palmer had sewn it specially for the occasion, working late into the night to finish the delicate embroidery. "As do you, little flower." Lena kissed her daughter's forehead, then looked up as Mrs. Palmer entered the small room where they waited. "It's time," the minister's wife said gently. "The church is full." Full. That could mean supporters or gawkers, friends or those simply curious about the drama unfolding between the Callahans and Harrison Caldwell. Through the thin walls, Lena could hear the murmur of voices, the creak of pews as people shifted in their seats. "Is he?" Rhett's waiting at the altar, looking nervous as a schoolboy. Mrs. Palmer smiled. "And Mr. Caldwell is seated in the back, scowling like thunder. Mr. Fitzgerald made sure he received an invitation, said something about establishing public recognition of the Union." Lena took a deep breath. So this was as much legal strategy as love declaration. Well, she could work with that. She'd learned to be practical about survival. The organ wheezed to life, playing a hymn her mother had loved. Elsie went first, scattering rose petals with solemn concentration. Then Lena stepped into the aisle, and every head turned. She kept her eyes fixed on Rhett, drawing strength from the wonder in his gaze. He stood tall and broad in his best suit, freshly shaved. His hair had tamed with pomade, but it was the expression on his face that made her breath catch. Pure, uncomplicated love mixed with a fierce pride that said, "This is my wife, and I'll fight the world for her." Reverend Palmer spoke of commitment and courage, of building new families while honoring the old. His words were carefully chosen, Lena realized, addressing the whispers and speculation that had followed them for months. "Marriage," he said, looking directly at the congregation, "is not about replacing what was lost, but about choosing to love again despite loss. It takes a special kind of bravery to open one's heart after grief, to build new happiness on ground watered by old tears." When it came time for the vows, Rhett took both her hands in his, speaking the words like a battle cry. "I, Rhett Callahan, take you, Lena Moore, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Lena's voice shook only slightly as she repeated the vows. Then came the moment Fitzgerald had insisted upon, the formal adoption declaration. Furthermore, Reverend Palmer continued, "Let all witness that Rhett Callahan does formally and legally claim Elsie Moore as his daughter, with all rights and responsibilities therein, to be known henceforth as Elsie Callahan, heir to the Callahan name and legacy." A murmur ran through the church. In the back, Caldwell half rose from his seat before Fitzgerald's hand on his arm stopped him. "You may kiss your bride," the Reverend said with a smile. Rhett cupped Lena's face tenderly, but the kiss he gave her was anything but gentle. It was a claim, a promise, and a challenge to anyone who would deny their right to happiness. The church erupted in applause, not from everyone, but from enough to matter. The reception was held at the ranch, tables set up under the cottonwoods, lanterns strung between the trees. The women of the town had outdone themselves with food, perhaps motivated by genuine kindness, or perhaps by the desire to be part of the unfolding drama. Even the territorial judge had come down from the county seat, Courtesy of Fitzgerald's invitation. Dance with me, Mrs. Callahan, Rhett said as fiddle music filled the evening air. Always. Mr. Callahan. They moved together under the stars, aware of the eyes watching but lost in each other. Elsie darted between the dancing couples, laughing with the other children. Finally, just a little girl at a party instead of a refugee. Fitzgerald says the adoption papers will be filed Monday. Rhett murmured against her ear. The judge seemed receptive to our argument. And Caldwell? Let me worry about Caldwell. His hand tightened on her waist. Tonight is for us. But Caldwell wasn't content to wait. As the evening wore on and the crowd thinned, he approached their table, his smile sharp as a blade. Lovely ceremony, he said, though I wonder if you've explained to your blushing bride the full extent of your debts. Cousin. Rhett went rigid. This isn't the time. Oh, I think it's exactly the time. Caldwell produced a leather folder. You see, Mrs. Callahan, your husband borrowed quite heavily to keep this ranch afloat after Sarah's death. The notes are coming due soon. Even if you manage to circumvent the inheritance clause, you'll lose the ranch to creditors. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. How much? $800, due in 6 months. Caldwell's satisfaction was palpable. So you see, all this legal maneuvering is merely postponing the inevitable. We'll get the money, Lena said firmly. Will you? How exactly? This ranch barely breaks even in a good year. He leaned closer. My offer stands. Sell to me now, and I'll give you enough to start over elsewhere. Otherwise, you'll lose everything and get nothing. The answer is no. Rhett growled. Now get off my property before I throw you off. Caldwell straightened, adjusting his coat. 6 months. Cousin, tick-tock. After he left, Lena found Rhett standing by the corral, staring into the darkness. She slipped her arms around him from behind, feeling the tension in his body. Why didn't you tell me about the debts? Didn't want to burden you? Thought I could handle it? Find a way? He turned in her arms. I'm sorry. You deserve to know. Yes, I did. But we're partners now. Your burdens are mine. She stood on her toes to kiss him. We'll find a way. We have 6 months. To raise $800, might as well be $8,000. Then we'd better get started. The next months were a blur of desperate industry. They sold everything non-essential. Sarah's jewelry, which Rhett insisted she would have wanted. The good china. Even some of the horses. Lena took in mending and laundry from town. Working late into the night by lamplight, Rhett hired himself out to neighboring ranches when he could spare the time. Slowly, painfully, the money accumulated. $200, $300. But it wasn't enough, and they both knew it. Then, on a sweltering July day, opportunity arrived in the form of Colonel Marcus Webb, a horse breeder from Austin. Heard you had a stallion sired by Blue Thunder, he said, mopping his face with a handkerchief. I'd like to see him. Rhett's prize stallion, Tempest, was the ranch's most valuable asset. He'd refused all offers for the horse, planning to build the ranch's future on his bloodline. He's not for sale, Rhett said automatically. Everything's for sale at the right price. Webb examined Tempest with an expert eye. I'll give you $500. Lena's heart leaped, but Rhett shook his head. No. $600. Mr. Webb. $700. And that's my final offer. Cash on the barrel. $700. Combined with what they'd saved, it would be enough. More than enough. But Tempest represented everything Rhett had dreamed of building. Selling him would mean starting over from nothing. We need time to discuss it, Lena said quickly. That night, they sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the decision between them. It's just a horse, Lena said gently. No, he's the future. Without him, we're just another struggling ranch with nothing special to offer. We'll have the ranch itself. We'll have each other. We'll build something new. With what? His frustration exploded. I'm 40 years old. Lena, too old to start over. Too tired to keep fighting for scraps. She moved around the table, taking his face in her hands. You're not alone anymore. And you're not fighting for scraps. You're fighting for our home, for our family, as if summoned by her words. Elsie appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Papa, are we going to lose the ranch?" Rhett pulled her onto his lap. "Not if I can help it, little one." "I have $17 saved," Elsie said solemnly, producing a small cloth purse. "From helping Mrs. Henderson with her chickens. You can have it." Lena's eyes filled with tears as Rhett hugged his daughter tight. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything." After Elsie went back to bed, Rhett sat silent for a long moment. Then, "I'll tell Webb yes in the morning." "Are you sure? Family is worth more than gold," he quoted softly. "Worth more than horses, too." 3 days later, they stood in Fitzgerald's office as the lawyer counted out the money to clear their debts. $812, with enough left over for winter supplies. "The ranch is safe," Fitzgerald announced, "and with Elsie legally adopted, Caldwell has no claim." They should have celebrated. But watching Tempest disappear down the road in Webb's trailer had taken something out of Rhett. He was quiet on the ride home, his shoulders slumped. That night, as they prepared for bed, Lena took his hand. "I have something to tell you. If it's more bad news, it can wait until morning." "It's not bad news." She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "At least, I hope you won't think so." His eyes widened. "You're 3 months along, near as I can figure." She watched his face anxiously. "I know the timing is terrible. With everything else," he silenced her with a kiss that left her breathless. When he pulled back, tears tracked down his cheeks. "Terrible. Lena, this is—" He laughed, the sound rusty but real. "This is a miracle. Even without Tempest, even starting over? Especially then." He cradled her face. "Don't you see, we're not starting over, we're starting fresh. New baby, new dreams, new chances." His hand moved to her stomach, reverent. "Boy or girl, this child will inherit more than land or horses. They'll inherit a legacy of love and determination. And stubbornness," Lena added. "Don't forget stubbornness. Especially stubbornness." He kissed her again. "Caldwell thought he could break us, thought debt and threats would drive us apart, but he didn't count on one thing." "What's that?" "The strength of a family that chooses each other every day." He pulled her close. "We may not have gold or prize stallions, but we have something worth more. We have each other, and a future to build together." Outside their window, the ranch stretched out under starlight, not the empire Rhett had once dreamed of. Perhaps, but theirs nonetheless. Bought with sacrifice, protected by love, and ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. In her journal that night, Lena wrote, "Today we saved our home by selling our dreams. But perhaps that's what dreams are for, to be traded for something real, something lasting. Tomorrow we begin again, with empty stables but full hearts. And that, I think, is its own kind of wealth." Spring arrived in a rush of green, painting the canyon with wildflowers and hope. The ranch had survived the winter, leaner perhaps, with fewer horses in the corral, but still standing. Lena moved carefully now, her pregnancy showing beneath her work dress, one hand often resting protectively on the growing life within. From the kitchen window, she watched Rhett teaching Elsie to rope, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. The girl had bloomed under his patient guidance, transforming from a silent, scared child into a confident young rider who could handle a horse as well as any hand. "Easy does it," Rhett coached as Elsie swung the lariat. "Let the rope do the work." The loop sailed through the air, settling neatly around the practice post. Elsie whooped with delight, and Rhett swept her up in a celebratory hug that made Lena's heart swell. This was what they'd fought for. Not just land or legacy, but moments like these, a family healing together, building something new from the ashes of old sorrows. "Mrs. Callahan." The voice from the doorway made her turn. Mary Martinez stood there, baby on her hip, exhaustion written in every line of her young face. She was new to the territory, her husband killed in a mining accident just 2 months after their arrival. "Come in, Mary, sit." Lena poured coffee, remembering her own desperate wandering. How are you managing? I'm not. Tears slipped down Mary's cheeks. The boarding house wants 2 weeks' rent, or we're out. I've tried everywhere for work. But, she gestured helplessly at the baby. Nobody wants to hire a woman with a child? Lena made a decision that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. You can stay here. The foreman's cabin is empty. It's small, but it's warm and dry. I have nothing to pay. Then you'll work for room and board, help with the house, the garden. When the baby comes, I'll need an extra pair of hands. Mary's tears came faster. Why would you do this for a stranger? Because someone did it for me when I needed it most. Lena squeezed her hand. And because that's what we do here. We take care of each other. By summer's end, the foreman's cabin housed not just Mary, but 2 other widows, Ellen Foster, whose husband had died of fever, leaving her with 3 young boys, and Agnes Chen, a Chinese woman whose husband had been killed in railroad construction, ostracized by both communities for their mixed marriage. The townspeople called it Callahan's Haven for Lost Women, some with derision, others with grudging respect. But Lena didn't care what they called it. She remembered too well the desperation of having nowhere to go, no one to turn to. You're building quite the commune here. Rhett teased one evening as they watched the children play in the yard. Elsie leading a pack that now included Mary's baby, Ellen's boys, and Agnes's quiet daughter, May. Is that a complaint? An observation. He pulled her close, hand resting on her swollen belly. Though I wonder what you'll do when we run out of cabins. Build more, she said simply. There's plenty of land. Our land, he corrected, that Caldwell can't touch. The mention of his cousin darkened the moment, though they'd defeated his legal challenge. Harrison Caldwell remained in town, investing in various businesses, always watching, waiting for them to stumble. But tonight, Lena refused to let him intrude. Feel that? She guided Rhett's hand to where the baby kicked. Strong already, like the mother. He kissed her temple. Have I told you today that I love you? Only twice. You're slipping. Their quiet moment was interrupted by Agnes appearing at the door. Sorry to disturb, but there is a man at the gate. Says he knows Mr. Rhett from before. The man was indeed familiar, Samuel Rivers, who'd worked as a hand when Sarah was alive. His clothes were trail-worn, his face gaunt with hard living. Sam. Rhett shook his hand. Been a long time. Too long. Sam's eyes darted nervously. I heard you might have work. I know I left sudden like before, but you left because I drove everyone away. Rhett's voice was steady. That was on me, not you. If you want work, you've got it. Relief transformed Sam's weathered features. Thank you. I won't let you down. As summer turned to fall, more came. Word had spread through the territory's underground network of struggling folks. Callahan Ranch would give you a chance when no one else would. They couldn't pay much, but they offered fair treatment, clean housing, and dignity. The harvest celebration that year was unlike anything the ranch had seen. Tables groaned under the weight of food grown in their own gardens, prepared by many hands. The main house rang with laughter in multiple languages: English, Spanish, Mandarin, even some German from the Schultz brothers who'd arrived just that week. Look what you've built, Mrs., Palmer said, finding Lena taking a moment's rest on the porch. This place is alive again. We built it, Lena corrected. All of us together. The minister's wife smiled. Sarah would be proud. This is exactly the kind of place she always dreamed of creating. You knew her well. Very well. She used to say the ranch felt too empty, too quiet, wanted to fill it with children and laughter. Mrs. Palmer squeezed Lena's hand. You've given Rhett what she couldn't, not just a second chance at love, but at the life he was meant to live. As if summoned by the conversation, Rhett appeared, little Thomas toddling beside him. Their son, born on a crisp October morning, had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. Someone wanted his mama, Rhett said, passing the sturdy toddler into Lena's waiting arms. Mama, Thomas confirmed, patting her cheek with a chubby hand. The party continued around them, children racing between tables, adults sharing stories and plans for the future. Jake Henshaw had slunk out of town months ago, chased by debts and the town's changing attitudes. Even Harrison Caldwell had given up his scheming, moving on to easier targets in Denver. As the sun set, painting the canyon walls gold and crimson, Rhett stood to address the gathering. The chatter died down, all eyes turning to him. 3 years ago, this place was dying, he began. So was I, truth be told. Thought I'd lost everything worth having. His eyes found Lena. Then God saw fit to send me a reminder that life goes on, that hearts can heal, that families can be built from more than just blood. He gestured to the assembled crowd. Look around. Every person here came to this ranch carrying loss. But together, we've built something new, something strong. We've proved that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who you choose to stand with. To chosen family. Sam Rivers raised his glass. To Callahan Ranch. Others chorused. But Rhett wasn't finished. He pulled out a familiar leather journal, his daily record. My Sarah used to say that family was worth more than gold. I wrote it down but didn't understand it. Not really. Not until Lena taught me that family is what you make it, what you fight for, what you open your doors to. He looked at each face in turn. This ranch is your home for as long as you need it. We may not have much, but what we have, we share. That's the Callahan way now. The applause was thunderous. Agnes's daughter May presented Lena with a silk painting of the ranch, complete with all its new additions. Ellen's boys performed a song they'd practiced. Mary's toddler, walking now, delivered a handful of wildflowers with solemn pride. As the evening wore on and guests began departing to their homes across the property, Lena and Rhett found themselves alone on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. No regrets, she asked, echoing his question from that night that seemed a lifetime ago. Only one. He pulled her close. That it took me so long to understand what you knew all along, that opening your heart to others doesn't diminish what you have, it multiplies it. She nestled against him. Pretty wisdom from a stubborn rancher. I learned from a stubborn woman. He kissed her softly. One who traded a cow for shelter and got a whole community instead. Best trade I ever made, she murmured. Inside, Thomas called for them, and Elsie's voice joined his. Their children, their family, their life. As they rose to go in, Lena paused, looking back at the land spreading out under starlight. The canyon that had once seemed like a prison now felt like arms holding them safe. The ranch that had nearly broken them had become a haven for others seeking hope. What are you thinking? Rhett asked. That sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as losses. That what we think we want isn't always what we need. She smiled up at him. And that, I'm glad you didn't take my cow. He laughed, the sound rich and full. Come on, Mrs. Callahan, our children are waiting. Together they walked into the warm light of home, where laughter echoed and love multiplied, where strangers became family and broken hearts learned to beat again. Outside, the night wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the scent of sage and possibility, wrapping around the ranch like a blessing. In her final journal entry, Lena wrote, We came here with nothing but desperate hope. We stay because we've built something worth keeping, not an empire of wealth or power, but a kingdom of kindness. Every soul who finds shelter here adds another stone to our foundation. We are rich beyond measure, not in gold, but in the currency that truly matters. Love freely given, burdens shared, and the knowledge that no one walks alone. This is our legacy, a place where family means choosing to stay, choosing to help, choosing to believe that together we are stronger than any storm. The lamp burned low as she closed the journal, but the light in their hearts burned eternal and bright, a beacon calling to all who needed what they had once needed themselves, a place to belong, a chance to begin again, and a proof that family is indeed worth more than gold. Thank you all for listening to this tale from the Wild West. I'd love to know where you're listening from, whether it's on a long drive through the desert, cozy in your living room, or maybe even out under the stars like those old cowboys used to do, please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of love, loss, and redemption from the American frontier. And share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward the sunset, and remember, the best treasures in life can't be measured in gold.